The next step of the process, after you've drawn the letter on one side, traced it on the back of the other side, and then added the shading or tone, is that we're going to transfer this to this paper. This is watercolor paper. The specifications are 140 pound. What that means is, based on paper, is that a ream of this paper weighs 140 pounds. A ream of this paper probably weighs 2,800 pounds, which means this is super thin, super skinny. This paper, as you can see, is very thick. This is watercolor paper. So this paper, and listen to the sound. The sound of that versus the sound of this. So you can tell the difference that this paper is about 10 times as thick as this paper, which also means it's 10 times as costly. So what we're going to do is we're going to place this paper on here. Notice how there's extra size on here around the edge. This paper that we're finishing up with is 9 inches by 12 inches. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 2 pieces of tape. We're going to fold over a little tab so that it's easy to take off on each of these. And then you can't see it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this tape on my pant leg to lift off some lint from my pant leg. What this does is it makes the tape semi-sticky or partially sticky. And the reason we do this is so that when we take the drawing off of the thicker paper, it doesn't tear the paper. So you can see the fabric, actually, the lint that was picked up off of my pant leg when I put the tape down. So now this tape will be very easy to take off. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a ballpoint pen, and I'm going to trace over the design. One of the things that I want to make sure that happens on this is that I want this to be obviously drawn by hand. What that means is I'm not using a ruler to draw the frame, and I'm not using a ruler to draw the letter on this design, because I want it to be obviously drawn by hand. The intended use of this drawing when we're finished, the primary use, is that we're going to upload them to a site called Etsy, and we're going to make them available for other people to download. Now you'll notice, since this paper goes farther than this one, that I did a little pencil line here to finish up the letter, because what's going to happen is, as I apply a little more pressure, as I'm drawing this with a ballpoint pen, what it's doing on the back is it's transferring this pencil that we scratched on the back here to the drawing paper here. That way we can transfer it instead of tracing it, because this paper is so thick it would be very difficult to trace anyway. And the reason I have it taped down at the top is so that I can lift it up to see where I have already drawn. So I can rotate this around as I'm drawing, because again, I'm applying a lot of pressure. You do have to be careful when you're doing this, because if you apply too much pressure, it will push right through the paper. And we don't want to do that, because we don't want ballpoint pen marks on the final, just the transferred graphite from where we scribbled on the back to the final paper. The other thing it does do also is it makes an indentation, because I'm applying a fair amount of pressure as I draw this. The other thing you want to be careful when you're doing is you don't want to draw it like this. These are called dagger strokes. Okay, if you'll notice, I was very confident in the way I traced this. So I'll lift it up one more time to make sure that everything transferred. And I can see now that everything has transferred from the pencil here to the fresh paper here. So I'm going to go ahead and take this off. After students transfer the letter, they're going to put their name, period number, shelf number, and grade level on this and turn this in so that I know that they are working on the next step. And the next step, I'm going to take a fresh sheet of paper and lay it on top of this drawing. I'm going to use this as a shield. So what I mean by that is, if you ever notice, sometimes you end up, and you can see just a little bit here where I've got some pencil mark on the side of my hand, because as I was tracing over this, the pencil that was here transferred to my hand here. In order to keep this drawing as clean as possible, you put another blank sheet of paper that doesn't have any markings on it. You don't want to use your other drawing to use as a shield, because it has all that on the back of it. And if I use this as a shield and I laid my hand on it, it would continue to transfer this to this drawing, and I want to keep this drawing as clean as possible. So now I'm taking this very fine liquid ink rollerball pen, and I'm going to carefully trace over the letter and the frame. But before I do that, let me do one more step. So this step's a little bit tricky too. What I'm going to do here, because what's involved in there is the letter, but also a tracing of your hand. And I'm going to actually do this in reverse, meaning I'm going to put my hand on this side, because there's a lot going on up here. There's a lot of detail in here, even though it's a very fat letter. So I'm going to place my hand on the page, somewhere on the page. I'm being very careful as to where I place my fingers. It's hard to see, but if you can look between my fingers here, part of the frame is there. I don't want to go too far outside the frame, but it's okay to have your thumb and your pinky and maybe one of your other fingers peeking out over the edge of the frame. Now, when you do this, you're going to trace your hand, and just like when I was showing you a minute ago, I don't want dagger strokes on this. Meaning I don't want drawing like this. I want you to very carefully, very lightly, just trace around your hand. Try and keep your pencil straight up and down when you're doing this, because it's really easy to draw your hand and your fingers way too fat if you angle the pencil. So try and keep your pencil as much as possible straight up and down. The other thing is, you'll notice I just moved my index finger as I was drawing, because I don't want the lines of the hand to end up next to the lines of the letter. So originally when I placed my hand down, it was covering that part of the letter. So instead I moved it over here a little ways so that it wasn't touching here. That would make a very confusing drawing. So next step in the process, I have my cover sheet or my shield, and this is super important too. I definitely don't want to do dagger strokes here. I want these strokes to be very confident. So I'm very carefully tracing over this line. I'm going to trace over the line of my hand and the letter and the frame using my shield. So on my hand, there's a lot of bumps because I'm an old dude, which a lot of my students remind me of fairly constantly about how old I am. It's kind of funny, actually. I turned 66 in June, which means for all of those students who are going crazy with that song lately, next summer I will be 67. There's a very popular phrase going around right now where anytime the kids hear it, they start repeating 6, 7. And yes, this is going on my YouTube video, so I have not heard the song. I have seen the references to it, but it's very popular right now. And every time I say, okay, if you're in 6th grade, 7th grade, or 8th grade, make sure to put that on your paper when you label it. So make sure you put 6, 7, or 8. And every time I say 6, 7, or 8, half the class erupts into 6, 7. It's very silly. But it's not any sillier than any of the stuff that I did when I was in school, so I can't fault them for that. It's okay to turn your paper around as you need, but continue also to move your shield. So you'll also notice that whenever I start and stop a line, this is a very long line. I'm not going to be able to draw it all in one line. So if I lift my pen up off the paper at any point, rather than trying to start right where I stopped, I'm going to back up a little bit and trace over the other line so that I can get as smooth of a line as possible. And I'm just doing a single line all the way around this drawing. Later on, we're going to use a fatter pen, and we're going to trace over the hand and the letter and the frame with a thicker pen. And the intention there is that the fatter pen will cover up a lot of the mistakes that we're making. I'm going to record this entire process for the website that I'm designing for this process and this lesson. So this video will go on that website at a later date as I continue to do this and add that to YouTube, and also add the YouTube video to Google Classroom, so that students who either weren't here or weren't paying attention to the process can watch the video later. I do get a lot of students who are absent, but more so I get a lot of students who don't really pay attention in class to my instruction. And since I do this 5 times a day, I like to have a video of it for all of those students to look at the video later, possibly even at home. But certainly for review for anyone who missed class, whether they were out sick, we're coming up on the Thanksgiving vacation, and oftentimes parents will take their students out of school early for Thanksgiving. So again, where this line starts on the thumb there, I'm going to start back a little ways here and overlap so that that line can be as clean and smooth as possible. The main thing I want students to understand on this is do not rush through this. This is going to be your final drawing, your final art for this project. So this is where you want to take a lot of time. You'll notice how slowly I'm drawing. Do not rush through this process. Everything else that we've done so far on this process, beginning with drawing the patterns, could be done a little more quickly, but you'll notice even when I'm inking the final, when I start adding the patterns later, I'm going to take my time and draw these patterns very slowly because they need to be very precise. Precision and accuracy are critical at this step. And so students should not rush this part of the process. They shouldn't really rush any part of the process. But at this point, it's super critical that they slow down and their lines are as accurate and precise as possible. And again, some of this we'll be able to cover up at the last point when we use a thicker marker for the final piece. But this should all be drawn very carefully, very slowly, and very deliberately. very precisely. This is the other part of craftsmanship. I mention craftsmanship all the time. Craftsmanship is how much care you take while you're producing your artwork. It's one of the things that I repeat multiple times every class, especially when we're doing something like this where it has to be precise. Putting the cover sheet or the shield on top of your artwork is the other part of craftsmanship, because this keeps your drawing neat and clean while you're working on it. And this is what professional artists do when they're working in their studios at home. There are multiple ways and methods of keeping your artwork clean, whether you're drawing, painting, sculpting, whatever you're doing. And you want to get into the habit of protecting your artwork while you're drawing it. There's one young lady in one of my classes whose artwork is amazing. The drawing and coloring, when she colors with colored pencils, I have said on multiple occasions, is borderline professional, meaning she could probably sell her artwork from the drawings that she's doing in class. That's one of the other points of having a website. The problem is, for her, that I have to keep reminding her, is that she doesn't take care of her artwork. I'm not going to show examples because I don't want to embarrass her, but she takes her artwork home and sometimes it comes back messed up, crinkled, dog-eared. This is dog-eared. When you do that to your paper, that's called dog-eared because that's the way a dog's ear folds over. This piece of paper with this final artwork on it needs to be taken care of very well. So I'm going to let this ink dry, post this video, and get to the next step in the next video, which is going to be to erase the pencil marks after the ink dries, and then add the patterns according to the drawing that I will show also in that other video, so that you can see what the end result's going to look like.